There is a lake in Union County, South Carolina called John D. Long Lake. It sits off Highway 49, about 6 miles outside of the town of Union. For decades, families drove out there on weekends to fish. Kids learned to swim there, couples parked along the bank at night. It was exactly the kind of quiet, unremarkable place that small southern towns are made of. On the night of October 25, 1994, a burgundy 1990 Mazda Protégé rolled down the boat ramp at John D. Long Lake and into the water. The engine was off, the headlights were off, the car moved in silence. In the back seat, strapped into their car seats, were two little boys. Michael Daniel Smith, 3 years old. Alexander Tyler Smith, 14 months old. They were asleep. A woman stood on the boat ramp and watched the car go in.
I want to say to my babies that your mama loves you so much. I just feel in my heart that you're okay. We will do anything we will to help you to get them home. Please bring them home.
Forensic investigators later did a reconstruction of what happened that night. They used the same model of car. They measured the grade of the boat ramp, the depth of the water, the distance from shore. And they timed it. It took 6 minutes for that car to fully submerge. 6 minutes. 360 seconds. Long enough to run back down that ramp. Long enough to grab a door handle. Long enough to pull two small children from their car seats and carry them to shore. The woman standing on that ramp did none of those things. She walked away. And here is something that most people who know this case have never heard. Something that only came out 30 years later, when a document obtained from the South Carolina Department of Corrections became public. That boat ramp was not the original plan. When Susan Smith left her house that night, she was not driving to John D. Long Lake. She was driving to a bridge. She planned to jump from the bridge while holding both of her boys. She was on her way there when one of the boys woke up in the back seat. She changed course. She found the lake instead. That is the case we are going to talk about today. This is The Dark Minds. If you are new here, subscribe right now before we go any further. Because what this channel does is go deeper than the headline. Deeper than the trial recap. Deeper than the 40-second news clip. We find the detail that changes the way you understand everything else. And in this case there are several of those details. Stay with me. Before we go anywhere near Susan Smith, I want to stop and spend time with the two people this story is actually about. Michael Daniel Smith was born on October 10, 1991 in Union, South Carolina. He was 3 years old when he died. Old enough to have a personality, old enough to have preferences and opinions and a sense of humor, old enough to know the faces of the people who loved him and to light up when he saw them. Alexander Tyler Smith was born on August 4, 1993, in Union, South Carolina. 14 months old when he died. Still a baby in every meaningful sense. Just starting to walk, just starting to connect words to the world around him, at the age where the face of someone you love is the single greatest thing you have ever seen. Alex never made it to his second birthday. They lived with their mother Susan at the family home on Hope Spring Drive, Union, South Carolina. Their grandparents, Susan's mother Linda and stepfather Beverly Russell, were close by. Their father David Smith, despite the failing marriage, saw them as often as he could. David Smith was born in 1970, also in Union. He and Susan had met as teenagers working together at a Winn-Dixie supermarket on Main Street in Union. He was a produce clerk. She was a checkout girl. They married in March 1991. The marriage was troubled almost from the beginning. There was infidelity on both sides, financial stress, the ordinary chaos of two very young people trying to build a life in a small town where everybody knows everything. By August 1994, they had separated for the final time. But David loved Michael and Alex. Everybody said so. Whatever was falling apart between him and Susan, those boys were never part of the collateral damage as far as David was concerned. Every chance he had to be with them, he took it. I want you to hold Michael and Alex in your mind through everything that comes next. This story is about to get very dark, very complicated, and very psychologically difficult to process. But it starts here. With a 3-year-old who loved toy cars and a 14-month-old who had just learned to walk. That is the anchor. Everything else orbits around them. If you are new to this channel and those two names just landed in your chest the way they are supposed to, drop them in the comments right now. Just Michael and Alex. No explanation needed. Let this community know that the people watching this video are the kind of people who remember. Now, who was their mother? Susan Vaughn Smith was born on September 26, 1971, in Union, South Carolina. She was the third child and only daughter of Harry Ray Vaughn, a mill worker, and Linda Sue Harrison. She grew up in Union, A mill town of about 10,000 people where families had known each other for generations and your reputation was something you lived inside every day whether you wanted to or not. When Susan was 5 years old, her parents divorced. 1 month after the divorce was filed, her father Harry Vaughn shot himself in the chest. Susan was 6 years old. She kept his coin collection in her bureau drawer for years afterward. She kept an audio tape of his voice. Her mother Linda remarried in 1979. The new husband was Beverly C. Russell Jr., son of a prominent Union family, a local stockbroker and businessman, active in the South Carolina Republican Party Executive Committee, and a member of Pat Robertson's Christian Coalition. Respected. No. Trusted. The family moved into a comfortable ranch house in Mount Vernon Estates, an upscale subdivision outside Union. By all outward appearances things were looking up. Susan attempted suicide for the first time at 13 years old. She attempted it a second time at 17, at the Winn-Dixie in Union, after a relationship with a 40-year-old store manager ended. She overdosed on aspirin. Doctors diagnosed her condition as an adjustment disorder. She was never given the sustained mental health care that diagnosis required. And there was something else happening in that house on Mount Vernon Estates. Something that would not fully come out until a courtroom in Union County in the summer of 1995. Something involving Beverly Russell. But we are not there yet. Stay with me. In 1987, Susan Vaughn was 15 years old and a junior at Union High School on North Duncan Bypass in Union, South Carolina. She went to her mother and to a guidance counselor at her school and told them that her stepfather, Beverly Russell, had molested her. Beverly Russell did not deny it. A Union County family court judge ordered them to live apart. The family agreed to undergo therapy. The case was sealed. A caseworker named Jenny Ward, who investigated the complaint, later testified at Susan's murder trial about what happened next. She said, and I am paraphrasing from her documented testimony, she said it was the only family court order she had seen sealed in 20 years. She testified that she believed the Russell family's prominence in Union County influenced the decision not to prosecute. Beverly Russell was not charged. He was not prosecuted. He moved out of the house temporarily. The family went to therapy briefly. And then the abuse resumed. According to court records and trial testimony, Beverly Russell continued a sexual relationship with Susan into her adulthood, after she graduated Union High School in 1989, after she married David Smith in 1991, after Michael was born, after Alex was born. And then, this is the detail that prosecutor Tommy Pope extracted from Beverly Russell on the witness stand under cross-examination. The last sexual encounter between Beverly Russell and his stepdaughter Susan Smith was in August 1994. 2 months before she drove to the lake. I want to be direct about something here because this case deserves that directness. None of what Susan experienced as a child and a young woman excuses what happened on October 25, 1994. Nothing does. Michael was 3 years old. Alex was 14 months. They had nothing to do with any of it. They cannot be collateral damage in someone else's trauma. I want to be completely clear about that. But understanding what Susan Smith carried into that night matters. Not because it softens what she did. Because it helps explain how a human being arrives at a boat ramp at 9:15 on a Tuesday evening and makes a decision that cannot be taken back. She had lost her father to suicide at 6. She had been abused by the man her mother trusted most. She had tried twice to end her own life. She had never once received sustained treatment for any of it. And now, in the autumn of 1994, the last strand she was holding on to was about to be cut. His name was Tom Findley. And you need to hear about this letter. Before we get there, hit the like button on this video right now. Not at the end. Right now. Tom Findley was J. Carrie Findley's son. 27 years old. Educated, well-traveled, wealthy by the standards of a small mill town. In Union, South Carolina, Tom Findley was known as the Catch. That is not an editorial comment. That is literally what people called him. The most eligible bachelor in town. Susan and Tom began dating in December 1993. She told him she and David were separated, which at that particular moment was not entirely a lie. The Smith marriage had been on and off for years. In March 1994, Tom found out Susan was still technically married and ended the relationship. They resumed after Susan and David separated for the final time in August 1994. Susan fell hard. She told Tom she would love him for the rest of her life. She believed this was the relationship that would change everything for her. The way out. The door she had been waiting her whole life to walk through. Tom Findley did not feel the same way. Before October 25, 1994, Tom wrote Susan a letter. It was 2 pages. That letter was later recovered, pulled from the submerged Mazda at the bottom of John D. Long Lake, and entered into evidence at trial. Prosecutor Tommy Pope read its contents aloud in court. The documented substance of that letter. Tom wrote that there were things about Susan that were not suited to him. He wrote to her children. He wrote that he was sure her kids were good kids. But it would not matter how good they were. The fact was he did not want children. Susan received that letter. She saw Tom 3 times on October 25, 1994, 3 separate meetings in the same day. He confirmed this on the witness stand. By the final meeting, Susan was, according to his testimony, completely overwrought. That night she put Michael and Alex in the car. She started driving. And as I told you at the top of this video, she was not driving to John D. Long Lake first. According to a South Carolina Department of Corrections incident report that became public, Susan told a documentary filmmaker from inside prison that she was driving toward a bridge. She planned to jump from the bridge while holding both boys. She was en route to that bridge when one of the boys woke up in the back seat. She changed course. She turned onto Highway 49. She drove to John D. Long Lake. She pulled up to the boat ramp. She put the car in neutral. She released the brake. And she got out. Subscribe to The Dark Minds right now. Because the detail I just told you, the bridge, the boy waking up, the course change, that is the kind of thing this channel exists to find. The detail that most coverage skips over. The detail that changes everything. Hit subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss another episode. At approximately 9:15 p.m. on October 25, 1994, Susan Smith walked from the boat ramp at John D. Long Lake approximately a quarter mile down Highway 49 to the home of Shirley and Rick McLeod. She knocked on their door. She was crying. She told them she had been carjacked. She described her attacker with precision. A black man, she said. Late 20s to early 30s. Wearing a dark knit cap, she called it a toboggan, and a plaid shirt. Armed with a gun. He had forced himself into her car at a red light at the intersection near Monarch Mills, a small mill community east of Union. He had ordered her to drive north on State Road 49. A few miles later, he had thrown her out of the car and driven away with her boys still in the back seat. The McLeods called 911. Deputies from the Union County Sheriff's Office arrived within minutes. Susan repeated the story. She was convincing, she was weeping, and she was a young white mother in 1994 South Carolina describing a black male attacker. The machinery of a manhunt began within the hour. Within 24 hours the story was national.
Kidnapping and tearless pleas for help broadcast across the nation. But
I think it takes a very sick and emotionally unstable person to be able to take 2 beautiful children like that, to be able to keep them from their parents.
The FBI was called in. South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, SLED, took jurisdiction. Over 100 officers and volunteers were on the ground. Helicopters swept Sumter National Forest with heat sensors. Tip lines flooded. And Susan and David Smith held press conference after press conference together. David believed every word. He stood beside her, he held her hand, he grieved in public for children who were 90 feet from the boat ramp. He had no idea. On camera, Susan looked directly into the lens and said, "To whoever has our boys, we ask that you please return them to us safely. They are our pride and joy and we love them so much." Now I need to pause here and say something about the racial element of this lie directly, because this part of the case does not get enough attention and it deserves it. Susan Smith did not just invent a carjacker. She invented a black carjacker. In 1994. In South Carolina. And she gave that description to police, to media, to the entire country. Prosecutor Kevin Brackett, who was Tommy Pope's chief deputy during the trial and later became 16th Circuit solicitor himself, stated publicly at the November 2024 parole hearing that black men who matched Susan's description were wrongfully pulled over and interrogated during those 9 days. Innocent men stopped and treated as suspects in a crime that never happened. Tommy Pope said it even more plainly at that same hearing. He said, "I just felt strongly that had the black man with the toboggan committed the crime, people would expect the death penalty. If David Smith had committed the crime, people would expect the death penalty." The implication was clear. Susan Smith chose a description that she knew would maximize sympathy for her and suspicion toward someone else. That is not a secondary detail in this case. That is part of what she did. Comment below on this. Tell me what you think. Do you believe Susan Smith calculated that racial element, or do you think it was panic? I genuinely want to know what this community thinks. This conversation matters. Leave your answer below. Meanwhile, the investigation was quietly falling apart for Susan. Union County Sheriff Howard Wells was leading the case. He had known Susan Vaughn Smith her entire life. He knew her family. He knew her history. And from the very first day, something about the story was wrong. The traffic light on Monarch Mills Road. Susan said she was stopped at a red light when the carjacker jumped in. But that particular light only turned red when triggered by an oncoming vehicle. Susan said there were no other cars. So why was the light red? The logic of the carjacking itself. Carjackers want a vehicle. They do not typically accept the complication of two toddlers they did not plan on and have no use for. Why would an armed carjacker drive away burdened with someone else's children? And then there was the lake. John D. Long Lake on Highway 49 is not on any logical route from where Susan said the carjacking happened. Reaching that lake requires a deliberate, specific detour. How does a carjacker unfamiliar with Union County end up at a particular lake down a particular road by accident? The FBI came in and produced a psychological profile. The conclusion: the perpetrator was likely known to the victims. Possibly a family member. Howard Wells asked Susan Smith to take a polygraph examination, administered by SLED agents. She sat down. She answered the questions. She failed. November 3, 1994. Day 9 of the search. Howard Wells asked Susan to come in. He did not come with a table stacked with evidence. He did not come aggressive, pressing, delivering contradictions one by one like a prosecutor would. That is not what happened. Howard Wells sat down across from Susan Smith, a woman he had known her whole life, and he said quietly, "Susan, I know that there was no black man." And Susan Smith broke. She began to cry. Not the managed, television-ready tears of the previous 9 days. Something different. Something that had been held for a very long time. She confessed. She told Wells what she had done and where the car was. She sat down and wrote it in her own handwriting, and she signed it at 5:05 p.m. on November 3, 1994. In that confession she wrote, "I was in love with someone very much, but he didn't love me and never would. I had never felt so alone and so sad in my entire life." She wrote that she had driven to the lake intending to die with her sons. That she had not wanted them to grow up without a mother. That at the last second something inside her pulled her from that car before it went in. She told investigators, the boat ramp at John D. Long Lake, Highway 49, Union County. They knew exactly where to go. David Smith was informed. He came to see Susan. He was the man who had stood beside her for 9 days in front of every camera in America, holding her hand, believing with his whole heart that some stranger had taken his sons. He looked at her and demanded to know the truth. Susan said 2 words to him. "I'm sorry." That was all she gave him. Hours after the confession, divers from the South Carolina Department of Natural Resources went to John D. Long Lake. They knew where to look. Diver Steve Morrow entered the water with his flashlight. He moved through the dark. He found the car, 90 feet from the boat ramp, 18 feet below the surface, nose down in the mud at the bottom of John D. Long Lake. He shone his flashlight through the window. And he saw a small hand pressed against the glass. Steve Morrow testified about this moment at trial. His voice cracked on the stand. He was not alone in that reaction. Tommy Pope was standing on the bank of John D. Long Lake when the car was brought up. He told CNN 30 years later, "I saw men and women in law enforcement just crying on that bank." Inside the car along with Michael and Alex, investigators found Susan's wedding dress. And a photo album. Everything that represented the life she was leaving behind. She had put it in the trunk with them. On November 6, 1994, a funeral service was held in Union, South Carolina. Friends, family, people from all over the community who had been searching and praying and hoping. Michael Daniel Smith, 3 years old. Alexander Tyler Smith, 14 months old. Brothers. They were placed together in a single casket. Subscribe to The Dark Minds. Hit the bell. This is the kind of story this channel will never stop telling, never stop getting right, and never let slip into the background. If you believe that stories like Michael and Alex's deserve to be told properly, be here for every one of them. The trial of Susan Smith opened on July 18, 1995, at the Union County Courthouse on North Main Street in Union, South Carolina. Judge William L. Howard Jr. presided. He made one decision early that set the tone for everything that followed. No cameras in the courtroom. He had watched what was happening with the O.J. Simpson trial in Los Angeles, and he wanted none of that for Union County. This trial would not be a television event. The courtroom was still packed every day. The press filled the gallery. The whole country was paying attention. Lead prosecutor was Tommy Pope, 16th Circuit solicitor, based in York County, SC. Tommy Pope walked to that podium and said it plainly. Susan Smith made a choice. She was working at Conso International on Oak Street in Union. She was in love with the boss's son. She read the letter. She understood what it meant. Her children were the obstacle. She drove to John D. Long Lake on Highway 49 and she solved the problem. He told the jury, letting go of that emergency brake was like pulling a trigger. The intent was formed the moment that car started moving. He entered Tom Finley's letter into evidence. It was read aloud. That courtroom went completely silent. Tom Finley took the witness stand. He confirmed the affair. He confirmed the letter. He confirmed he had ended the relationship partly because he did not want children. He told the court that Susan had once told him, "I will love you for the rest of my life." Then Judy Clark stood up. She said, "This is not a case about evil. This is a case about despair." She walked the jury through Susan's entire life. And then in the penalty phase, Beverly Russell took the stand. He was the last defense witness. He had been absent from the courtroom throughout the trial. Now he sat in the witness box. This prominent local businessman, this former Republican Party Executive Committee member, this Christian Coalition leader, and he read aloud from a letter he had written Susan from prison on Father's Day, 1995. He sobbed. He said, "You don't have all the guilt in this tragedy. Had I been true to you and my responsibilities, you would have been stronger in yourself. My heart breaks for what I have done to you." And then, under cross-examination by Tommy Pope, Beverly Russell acknowledged that consensual sexual relations with Susan had continued after her marriage to David Smith. He said the last time was August 1994, 2 months before October 25th. He was never charged. He lost his positions in the Republican Party and the Christian Coalition after the trial became public. He returned to private life in Union, South Carolina. David Smith testified. He said, and I am quoting from court records, "All my hopes and dreams, everything that I had planned for the rest of my life, it ended that day." He said he wanted the death penalty. He told the jury the only justice for Michael and Alex was for Susan to face what they had faced. The jury deliberated. On July 22, 1995, they returned a verdict. Guilty. 2 counts of murder. The penalty was decided by the same jury. They voted for life in prison, not death. 2 concurrent life sentences, with the possibility of parole after 30 years. Had Susan Smith been sentenced 1 year later, after the South Carolina legislature changed the law, she would have been ineligible for parole entirely. She was sentenced in July 1995. The law changed in 1996. Susan Smith has been incarcerated at Leith Correctional Institution in Greenwood County, South Carolina since her conviction in 1995. And 30 years in that institution have not been quiet. In 2000, a prison guard named Alfred Rowe was fired after admitting to a sexual relationship with Smith. A second guard was later disciplined for the same reason. Prison records show drug use charges in 2010 and again in 2015. There were violations related to unauthorized phone use. And then, in August 2024, 3 months before her first parole hearing, Susan was charged with an internal disciplinary violation for communicating with a documentary filmmaker by telephone. The incident report, reported by CNN, described the substance of those calls. Susan and the filmmaker discussed shooting a documentary after the parole hearing and how she would be compensated for her participation. They discussed the crime in detail, including, the report states, Susan's account of what was in the trunk of the car when it went into the water. And this is the detail that confirms what I told you at the beginning of this video, including her plan to jump from a bridge while holding the boys. Her account of how one of them woke up. Her account of how she changed course and drove to the lake instead. The filmmaker deposited money into Susan's prison account. She was found guilty at an internal hearing. She lost her telephone, tablet, and canteen privileges for 90 days. In January 2025, Fox News reported what a Leith Correctional Institution employee described about Susan's behavior. In the year leading up to the parole hearing, this employee said Susan was cooperative, helpful, even pleasant. After the denial, overnight she became a complete nightmare, just rude all the time. The employee said, the previous behavior was just an act to get out of prison. November 20, 2024. The South Carolina Department of Probation, Parole and Pardon Services, Columbia, South Carolina. 9:30 in the morning. The first parole hearing for Susan Smith in 30 years.
What would you like to tell us today?
First of all, I want to say how I love Alex with all my heart.
of drugs or alcohol the night that you murdered your children?
No, ma'am, I was not.
Your attorney talked about working with mental health. Is that helpful to you?
Ma'am,
Mr. Thomas
I
talked,
hear you.
Mr. Thomas talked about the fact that you were working with mental health, and my question is that helpful to you?
Yes, ma'am.
Is that something that you would be willing to continue with on the outside if you were granted parole?
Yes, ma'am.
Susan appeared by video link from Leith CI. She was 53 years old. Her attorney, Tommy Thomas of Union, argued that this was above all a mental health story. He said Susan posed a low risk to public safety. He said she wanted to work with animals and live a quiet life. Susan spoke. She wept. She bowed her head. She said, "I want to say how very sorry I am. I know that what I did was horrible. I would give anything if I could go back and change it. I love Michael and Alex with all my heart." She said, "I lost touch with reality. My thoughts were not logic. I knew Jesus could take better care of them than I could." She said, "I didn't lie to get away with it. I really didn't." Then the board opened the floor for victim statements. 470 people had written to the South Carolina Office of Victim Services before the hearing. 470 letters, emails, and messages. 6 of them were in favor of Susan's release. The rest, 464 plus, were against it. 14 people came to testify in person. Many of them wore pins, small round pins with a photo of Michael and Alex printed on them. And then David Smith stood up. He had a pin too. He had fastened it to his jacket before he walked into that room. His wife Tiffany sat beside him. He had rebuilt his life. He had remarried. He had a new child. He had found a way to keep living through something that, by his own account, had come close to ending him. And he still showed up. He paused several times before he could find words. When they came, they were quiet. Not shouted. Quiet. He said, "I'm not here to speak about what she's done in prison. You all have the records. I'm just here to advocate on Michael's and Alex's behalf and as their father. God gives us free choice. And she made free choice that night to end their life. This wasn't a tragic mistake. She purposely meant to end their lives. I never have felt any remorse from her. She never expressed any to me." He said, "What she did not only to Michael and Alex, she came pretty close to causing me to end my life because of the grief she brought upon me." He said, "Only 15 years per child, her own children, is just not enough. That's why I'm asking you to please deny her parole today and hopefully in the future. I will be here every 2 years going forward to ensure that their death doesn't go in vain." Tommy Pope, now Speaker pro tempore of the South Carolina House of Representatives, also spoke. He said, "Susan has always focused on what's best for Susan." The board voted. Unanimously. 1 member recused. The rest voted as one. Denied. Susan Smith will not be eligible for parole again until November 2026. David Smith has made clear he will be in that room. He said so on his way out of the building. He told reporters, "At least I know for now she's still behind bars. For 2 more years there will still be justice for Michael and Alex." Say their names in the comments. Just Michael. Just Alex. That is all I am asking. Let this comment section be full of those 2 names. Let every person who finds this video see those names first. And if this video made you feel something you needed to feel, share it. 1 share. Send it to 1 person who should know this story. That single act is how a channel like this grows. And growth means more stories, more names, more cases that deserve to be told the way Michael and Alex's deserves to be told. Like the video. Subscribe to The Dark Minds. Hit the bell so you never miss an episode. And tell me in the comments, do you think Susan Smith should ever be released? David Smith will be in that room in November 2026. I will be watching. And so, I hope will you. We will see you in the dark.